Hi everybody, I think this is your third supper club. This is for December, and we're at my house. You'll see a different backdrop here today, and we thought this time we would talk about God, just general understandings of God, a little theology, maybe a little bit about how we see God. We'll just see how it goes and get you guys with some questions to think about it as well. So hope you've had a good dinner. First thing we're going to talk about is immanence versus transcendence, and I'm leaving that one to you.
Okay. All right, I'll start. Immanence and transcendence. Transcendence is a word you probably know. It's a word that we use in our common vocabulary. Immanence, not so much. It's a word that doesn't get used too much anymore. And it talks about, the words almost always are spoken about together because they really do reflect what we theologically we believe is the unity of God, so that we don't talk about the nearness. They mean basically the nearness of God, and I guess for lack of better words, the beyondness or the far away part of God. And that is that we try to think about, when we think about God, we think about God as being close to us in some ways, and also of being something that we can't quite get a hold of. And this is very good theology. It's not only our own human experience. That's one of the things we learn, I think, is that human experience has led to theology, not the other way around. And when we talk about the study of God or coming to know God in some way, this is one of the first tensions that we feel between immanence and transcendence.
What's great about transcendence is that it keeps us from getting that container around God. I mean, if God is just simply our friend, someone who's with us and in our hearts, and we understand them like we understand another person,
Right.
We are limiting God and what God can be in the world, and we've got to be very clear to have that humility that comes with, and there's the transcendence of God, the otherness, the beyondness that we can never fully understand.
Right. A lot of people will talk to pastors and say to us, "You've got a red phone, don't you?" Or, "Can you do something about the weather? Something's happening." And it's those points at which we remind them of the transcendence of God, that none of us can bring God closer, and that God seems to be in places and visit us in ways that seem far away. As far away as the night sky is, you look up at a star, that might be a way to experience the transcendence of God. Certainly when a child kneels before bed and says her prayers, or his prayers, that's a way to feel the immanence of God, if we want to put it in concrete terms. So.
Another way that theologians talk about God is with the ideas of theism, pantheism, and panentheism. And there's lots more categories, I'm sure.
Those are big words.
Those are big words, I know.
Yeah.
How about that? I know all those. Theism gets at the idea of a being, a God that's in a form. Whether we take that as the traditional form in heaven, in a place. I mean, there certainly for thousands of years that was the understanding of God. Probably not as many of us really think of God as, maybe you do, I don't know, but think of God in a form sitting somewhere in the physical world like that. Pantheism helps to move from that to an idea that God is in everything. And that everything is God. There's just this sense in which God's Spirit is in everything.
Sort of Native American is
often associated with pantheism.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that.
Right. And a little bit of a twist on that is what's called panentheism, which has the same sense of pantheism, that God is in everything, but it gets back to the transcendence piece in that, and God is more than everything. So it's not simply that the whole world and the physical world is God, which is closer to pantheism as I understand it. Panentheism would say that God is in the world and in all of the world, and
there's something beyond that is also God. It's almost as though the sum of the parts is not the whole, that God is the whole that is beyond the sum of the parts. And so those are interesting thoughts to think about. When the Bible was written, of course, they thought the earth was flat. And so it made sense in that way to think of God in a theistic sense. That is, that if we are living here on the flat earth, God must be above and someone else must be below. And so ever since the time that, the Copernican revolution and Galileo began to teach us a few things scientifically about the world, the questions have been, how do we now conceive of God? How do we think about God? So it might be interesting for your discussion.
Are you more of a panentheist, or?
I am more of a panentheist, I think. Yeah, you too?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing. We're working together.
Okay, good.
Okay.
The otherness of God.
The otherness of God is something that's very big in Protestant theology. Well, I suppose perhaps in all theology, but it's something that John Calvin, one of our forebears, really taught about, and that is that there is a part of God that is so other than creature, than human, that we will never ever be able to discern or understand in the way that we're used to understanding things what God really is. That God has a quality and a being that is not just it's not a superhero or God is not a form of humanity in any sense. God is completely other, and that's a very hard also concept to grasp.
And so we're always left with just our images and kind of metaphors of God. It's never that we contain it. That's why there's so many metaphors. So I thought we'd finish with just some thoughts on how we imagine God in the best sense of that. So one for me that I've used before, I think in a sermon, but I find it helpful just in my life, particularly during tough times, is God as a river. I don't think of God as a being that comes in and decides sometimes and sometimes not to intervene, but as a kind of presence, and a river works for me because it flows. There's this flow always there that I can step into, that I can be a part of, and let it flow through me. I guess river works because of the sense of flow and energy.
It's nice.
There's times where I think of myself, okay, I'm in the flow, I'm in the river, and I can feel it, and it's a good, I feel, it's not so much Greg there that something else is moving through me, and those are usually the right thing happens when I trust that, or if you can trust it. So that's a good one for me. I don't know if you have an image that you keep in mind.
I think lots of images, the language of creator, redeemer, sustainer, all of those things, the traditional words for God, as well as my own experiences. But I would say that the sort of the most important one to me now is, or the one that comes to me most often now, is a big enough God, an image of a God that just keeps getting bigger. As I get older in my life and as I experience more, I find that my understandings or my pictures or my images of God that have held fast for a long time all of a sudden get pushed a little bit, and they move out to accommodate something new that I've experienced or learned. This is particularly true in terms of interfaith work and figuring out, how is it that my tendency is to make God smaller so that God is what I need God to be. But I think God's tendency is to be bigger. It's interesting because scientifically it's a little bit like the expanding universe. And I find that in my own sort of theological understanding of God, that it just keeps getting bigger. And I hope my God is big enough. And I hope God is big enough. Yeah.
All right, how about 3 questions? First one, where do you experience God? This is a chance to talk about maybe some experiences you've had where you say, that was a God moment for me. That was something where I felt the presence of God in a special way. So that would be one question for you.
A second one would be, what are your images of God? And I guess also, are those images important? Or what's the interplay between your image of God and how that image affects what you believe and how you practice your faith and how you understand God in your everyday life? What are your images of God? Start with that and move into, are those images important?
And then the last one, how do you think God works in the world, acts in the world? It's the question of miracles. It's the question of is it a big puppeteer and we're all kind of predestined,
right.
predetermined?
Is it a watchmaker where God wound up the world and just watching it go?
Yeah. Those are some of the big answers that have been put before. I mean, I'm not sure any of us know for sure, feel too confident in saying exactly how God works in the world. So
I think we all know that God works in lots of different ways in the world. So that might be a good thing for your discussion as well, to talk about personally for each of you, how have you experienced God working in the world. So have a great time. Hope that you had a good dinner, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks. Bye.